Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Forestry podcast. I'm your host, Seth Stephenson, the communications coordinator with the Arkansas Forestry Association. And today, I'm joined by Robert Murphy, the emergency services director with the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. And today, we're here to talk about wildfires. We've talked about prescribed fire. Now we're going to talk about one that's a little more out of control. So, Robert, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Seth.
So, before we hop into the topic, people who listen to the show pretty regularly probably know what's going to happen now. But if you could just kind of give us an overview of who you are, what you do with the Department of Ag.
Okay, so I am the Emergency Services Director for the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. I work for the Forestry Division, and I coordinate the emergency support functions for the department, ESF4, which is fire, and ESF11, which is agriculture and natural resources. But I do that, but my day-to-day job is I supervise all the fire programs for the department, for the division of forestry or forestry division, which include our rural fire division in Greenbrier, which takes the federal excess trucks, old military trucks, and converts them to fire trucks for volunteer fire departments. And then I'm over the aviation department. So we have a fleet of 14 fixed-wing aircraft that we use for fire detection, as well as surveying the state for insect and disease problems, things like that. I'm over our dispatch center. So we have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week dispatch center for dispatching us to wildfires. So I'm over that, and then I kind of maintain the fleet of firefighting equipment for the state as well. And I'm over our training program. So when we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 firefighters in the state. Oh, wow. So we've got to keep all those folks trained up.
Yeah, And so you've got a nice umbrella of stuff.
I've got a big, wide variety of things that I take care of. Yes.
And now your background, or you and I first met when you were still with at the time, Forestry Commission, but now known as the Forestry Division. So your background is in forestry. Correct?
Yeah. I started with the Forestry Commission at the time in 2005. I started out as a ranger, which is a bulldozer operator down in the south part of the state in Bradley County, which is where I'm from. So I started out there as a dozer operator, did that for about 18 months, and then took a job as a forester in Cleveland County and worked Cleveland and Jefferson County for a while. Did that about 7 years, and then took a job as a district forester and worked as the District 1 district forester for 4 years, and then got this position, moved into this job.
So essentially, we've got the perfect fit of forestry and wildfire emergency services guy with us today.
Well, I don't know how perfect it is, but I'm the best they could come up with anyway.
Hey, we'll take it. All right, well, Robert, like I said, today we're here talking about wildfire, and when I first reached out to you, kind of the big question that I had is, and it's a weird question now that I think about it, is asking you about wildfire seasons. And we're getting pretty close. This is coming out in June, but we're getting pretty close to a wildfire season, right?
Well, yeah. Typically, we have two kind of split seasons in the state. We just got through with what historically is our biggest season. So the spring fire season, January, February, March, and April are our biggest fire months. March is actually our biggest fire month historically. We just finished that one up, and we'll start another one probably about the middle of August. So
okay.
So we run. We'll have another little small run August, September, October, and depending on when the winter rains start, it can bleed over into November. But we'll see how the weather holds.
And so, I guess my question, I mean, why are these months so much worse, or why are these the months that you guys kind of keep an eye out for compared to some of the other months?
Well, spring fire season, it coincides with a little bit of dry weather. So February, we usually start getting dry cold fronts. We go through a kind of a little droughty period or drier period, and you've got all the winter kill grass, all the leaves are on the ground from the trees, everything's cured out and dormant. So it provides a pretty good opportunity for a lot of fuel on the ground, and a lot of cured out fuels for fire to spread. So fire burns not just in the woods very easily, but it burns across what would typically be hay pastures or or cattle pastures, which are green in the summer and a lot into the fall, it burns across those as well pretty easily. So it just provides a really good opportunity in the spring. And then towards the end of summer, when we start getting our hot, dry periods, those October and September and October are historically very dry months. And even though the grass, we're coming out of summer, it's green, things are starting to kind of think about going into dormancy for the fall. And if we're in an extended drought, or it's really hot and it's stressing the vegetation out, they can go dormant a little early, and it provides another opportunity for a lot of fuel to be available for burning.
So I'm gonna ask you probably some dumb questions. I'll just be blunt, but I want to make sure that everyone has this knowledge base moving forward in case we need to build upon or further discuss wildfires or anything in that kind of category. So bear with me if you don't mind. But I guess what exactly, when we're talking about a wildfire, what exactly are we talking about? What do you guys classify or I guess define a wildfire as?
Well, it's any fire that's burning uncontrolled. So when you talk about prescribed fire, generally prescribed fire, there's hopefully been some homework done. There's some fire lanes have been put in, some control lines have been put in to kind of hold that fire in the area that you want it to burn in. Whether that's a 4-acre burn, or if you're the U.S. Forest Service, it could be a 4,000-acre burn. Mm-hmm. But there's control lines or some kind of something barrier there to stop the fire growth that you're expecting that fire to stop at. With a wildfire, it's burning free, and there may be a road a mile ahead of it, but who wants to give up that much ground if you can keep from it? So the timber company don't want to lose that much timber. The private landowner doesn't want to lose that much timber. So a wildfire is just burning free, and we try to stop it. So.
Well, yeah, I know mile doesn't seem like that far, but when there's a literal monetary value to what's on that mile, it's a whole other story.
It can add up to lots of dollars really fast.
Yeah. And so when you guys, this may be a pretty broad question, but when you guys are, I guess, investigating these fires, the cause of these, is there one major thing that you can kind of pinpoint, or is it just an amalgamation of different sources when these things start?
So the two biggest causes of wildfire in the state, and they flip-flop sometimes, but typically what we call debris burning is the number one cause, which is basically just it could be somebody doing a control burn and they let it get out. It could be somebody burning just a pile of leaves in the yard, and that got out. It could be a trash barrel that's burning, and it gets out. So it's caused from an intentional fire being set, and then allowed to escape someone's control. So that's debris burning.
Okay.
And then arson is usually our number two cause for fire in the state. Huh. So it usually falls not really close behind all the time, but it's usually the number two leading cause of fire in our state.
Interesting. See, I would have thought it was, the classic flicking a cigarette out the car window, and it just happens to catch whatever it lands on.
Well, and a lot of people would think that as well, but actually the cigarette butt being flicked out the window is a very minor. It's actually almost impossible for that to start a fire. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say it is impossible, but it's got to be, I'm talking the perfect scenario for you to be able to flick a cigarette out the car window and it just start a fire on the side of the road. It just almost never happens.
Okay. So when you guys get a call, I guess, is that how you usually learn about these wildfires? Is just by someone calling into the dispatch center?
Yeah, we get them reported either to a county 911 dispatch center, and then they report it to us. Sometimes the volunteer fire departments are the first ones on the scene, and they get it there and they decide they can't handle it, so then they call us through their dispatch center. But the 911 systems in the counties and cities usually refer that to our dispatch. Sometimes they'll call our local rangers. They tend to have pretty good relationships within the county, so sometimes they'll call our local rangers. Sometimes we pick them up with that fleet of aircraft when they're flying over the state. We detect a lot of fires with those as well. So it may be just that we picked it up. So it happens in a variety of methods for us to learn about.
So I've got to assume, and that's dangerous doing that, but this has to be, when you go out to fight this, it has to be drastically different than, say, the local fire department rushing to a house fire. There's got to be a difference there, right?
Well, there's a little difference. I mean, number one, their number one weapon is water. Our number one weapon is a bulldozer, and that's what we use. So there's a couple different ways to fight fire. One is to cool it off with water, and you take the heat away, you break the fire triangle, you put the fire out. What we do typically is so there's what we call the fire triangle. There's heat, fuel, and air or oxygen, and you take one of those elements away, and the fire goes out. So structure firefighters focus on the heat. We focus on the fuel. It's a whole lot easier to take 200 acres and break the fuel, and when you put a break in the fuel, it doesn't have anything to burn, so the fire goes out. Okay. Now we're about to step into Smokey Bear territory, and Okay.
I know this is stuff that people have probably most definitely heard in their school days from their local forestry divisions coming into their schools. But I guess, what is the best way, when we're talking about landowners, which is who kind of this podcast is generally aimed at, but what is the best way for landowners to maybe try to prevent something like this happening?
Well, if you're talking about catastrophic wildfire, the best way, you might have heard the old adage, the best way to fight fire is with fire. That's one of the number one ways for a landowner to defend themselves against catastrophic wildfire, and that's to manage their property, to manage their timber, so that the forest is healthy. And then, you can do control burns or prescribed fire to help reduce the fuel loading. So you go in every 3, 4, 5 years, however often you need to, and you run a controlled low intensity fire through your stand and burn all the fuel up. And then when a catastrophic fire comes towards your property, if there's no fuel there or very little fuel to burn up, it's going to slow it down, or at least it might not stop it, but it'll reduce the intensity enough to keep your land from facing catastrophic loss anyway.
So that active management is just an excellent, huge step to take to prevent something.
Active management is the key to healthy forest, and healthy forests are fire resilient. So
we probably can't go this whole episode without mentioning some of the more recent wildfires we've just seen in the country. Even outside of the country, when we're talking like California wildfires and the Australia wildfires. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the big causes of some of those fires, or the reasons that they were so big and lasted for so long, was a lack of active management.
That is exactly right. That's one of the biggest problems out west, is lack of management. So whenever the timber is allowed to get overly dense, and you've got a lot of dead, down, woody fuel on the ground, because if we don't thin the forest will thin itself. And when we thin it, we take all that off and we use it for pulp, or we use it for chips, for fuel wood, for providing electricity somewhere, or we use that wood somewhere else. But when nature thins itself out, all that wood is left, and it's on the ground, it's out there, it's available for fire. So when a fire comes through, it just burns that much hotter, that much more intense, and it's that much harder for us to put it out.
And I think, as unfortunate as some of those events were, and the damage that it caused, I think they are good learning lessons moving forward for both people in the West, in the central part of the country, and even in the East, to look at places like this and say, okay, what can we do to be better? What can we do to move forward, and what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Right.
So I think they're good things to at least point at and say, this is what can happen if it's not actively managed.
Correct. Those are very good examples of what happened.
So when you guys are out there trying to break this fire triangle, what are some of the, you said, is it bulldozer the biggest technique that, or I guess tool that you guys
That's
have
the
at your
biggest
disposal?
tool that we use. Of course, we also, during the higher fire occurrence periods that we have. We have a contract with a single engine air tanker service, which are single engine fixed wing aircraft. They're basically, just think crop duster. It's the same aircraft that they use for spraying in most of the Delta. They're just, instead of having spray equipment on them, they have what's called a fire gate on it. So they drop water. And if you've watched the news and watched them fight fire out in California, you probably saw one of their big planes, what we call a VLAT, which is a very large air tanker. You see those dropping fire. It's just a smaller version. So we do use those when we need to, especially if we're protecting a structure or something like that. They come in really handy for that kind of work. So we have a contract with those. We don't actually own them, but we contract with them. So we have them twice a year during 2 different periods. Those fire seasons that we talked about, those heavier fire current seasons, we have access to those. And then we are kind of getting into some newer technology to help us out. We've got the fixed wing aircraft that we can do detection with, or we can do aerial surveillance with while we're on a fire. But we just purchased, I believe, 10 infrared capable drones. So we're getting ready to put those in the field. We're doing training for folks right now, hoping to get those in the field by this fall fire season. We got one in the field earlier this year, and kind of found it ironic. They come and picked it up, and the very first day they had a fire that afternoon, and were able to use it on the fire that day.
Well, of course.
So those are some new things that we're getting into, and the drone business it's not cheap. I mean, they're not extremely expensive. They don't cost anything like a bulldozer, but we're trying to get into that business. Anything we can find technology-wise to make our jobs safer and more efficient is what we're going to try to take a look at.
Well, and that was going to be my next question was, I guess, how different is it having access to some of this technology compared to, doing this previously? Is there a big difference, or is there even a difference at all?
Well, and that remains to be seen a little bit. I can see us being far more efficient, not just in how we staff a fire, but where those, or how many people we put on a fire, but how we put those people on the fire. So any kind of intelligence that we can gather with that drone to say, hey, there's we put a bulldozer in a place, and maybe you put the drone up and you figure out there's an ATV trail. Somebody's got a deer stand and there's an ATV trail they got beat out. Well, we can plow and open that ATV trail up far faster than we can punch our own hole through a pine plantation. So any kind of that intel makes us more efficient and better firefighters.
So it just comes down to the tactics of it all, just about.
Yeah,
so.
It comes down to the intelligence. How much, the more you know, the better off you are.
Okay.
So it comes down to gathering more information and allowing our folks to make better decisions on the fire.
So you mentioned earlier when we were kind of introducing who you were, that you assist with the education of your folks to go out and fight these fires.
Yep.
What does all of that entail? What does the education to do something like this look like?
So we have standards. So there's an entity called the National Wildfire Coordination Group, NWCG, and they have a curriculum for a national standard that all firefighters across the state or across the nation can take if you want to be certified to go out west. So we have a lot of our folks that go out west and fight fires. So if you want to do that, you have to maintain yourself to a certain standard of education. And we use those programs to educate our firefighters, just like Mississippi does, just like Oklahoma does, just like California does. I mean, we're taking the same classes, using the same curriculum, and it helps create an environment where folks can move from Arkansas to California and be able to fight fire and understand what they're doing. And even though we speak different languages, it seems like anyway, we understand we're using the same terminology to talk about the same things. And it just provides a continuity across the nation for firefighters.
And now, are most of your firefighters, are they consistent of Forestry Division folks, or are these actual volunteer fire department people, or who does this consist
So
of?
we employ around 200 firefighters in the forestry division.
Okay.
And those are scattered across the state in and I'm going to get the number wrong, but like 65 different county offices.
Okay.
And it may be 63. I don't remember which. But we have them scattered across the state, and most counties have an office in them, except for the Delta counties. There's a few Delta counties that don't have offices in them. But anywhere there's a timbered part of the county, we have an office in those counties. So those folks are scattered across the state and are ready to respond to fires in their county or wherever we need them to go.
Okay, so they're just about all over the place.
Yeah, and then of course we have the volunteer fire departments that we help in the counties, and we rely heavily on them as one of our partners to help us maintain and help us fight fires, on a day-to-day basis. So.
Yeah. Okay. Now, another dumb question for you as we kind of start nearing the finish line here. Let's say I'm a landowner and I am one of the unfortunate folks who had a wildfire move through. You guys came out, put it out. What does a wildfire, I guess, do to my land? What does my land look like now? What do I need to do, I guess, going forward?
It's going to depend on the intensity. I mean, 97 to 98% of the fires that we go to, maybe even more like 99% of the fires we go to, you're perfectly fine. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a catastrophic wildfire, we have those occasionally. We've been in a really wet period here over the last about 9 years. It's been since we had a real fire season. So we haven't had one of those really catastrophic fires in a while. But when we do, then it's it can be anywhere from a total loss to you pretty much have to go in and start over, or maybe it's just a patch. But you can do some. The markets really aren't there now to do a whole lot of salvaging, but you can try to salvage what's there and then start all over. It just depends on the type of fire that runs through. So it could be the best thing to do is call a forester and get them to come look at it after it happens and work with a professional to help you figure that out.
And I guess maybe that's where I was trying to get to in a very roundabout way, was that if you do have a fire, it's not the end of the world. Unless it is a catastrophic fire, which seems very rare. And
they don't happen very often.
Yeah,
here.
Especially with the amount of rain we've had just recently.
Yeah.
But there is a way you can bounce back. It's not that bad. And it all comes back to what we've talked about countless times on this show, getting a professional out there to help you, ask questions, help figure out what needs to happen next.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's good to know. Maybe a little reassurance. That doesn't mean folks go out there and, start burning up leaves and burning up trash in a barrel and, walk away from it. It just means that if something were to happen, it's okay. Everything's going to be fine.
It's going to be all right.
Good. Well, Robert, I guess, is there anything else that we need to discuss or anything else you think people might need to know before we kind of start wrapping up the episode here?
Smokey says don't play with matches.
There we go. Again, I said we were getting close to Smokey territory, so
there we go.
Might as well bring in some of his wise words of wisdom.
Yeah, I'm not Sam Elliott, so I can't get the only you can prevent forest fires.
Dang. Well, we'll try to see if we can reach out to Mr. Elliott and get a nice little VO for us for this episode. Well, Robert, hey, man, I appreciate you coming out here and talking with us. I know you've got a busy schedule, and it's only getting busier.
Yeah.
But thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, really thanks, Seth. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to thank you guys, as always, for stopping by this month and listening to our show here. Like always, we want to make sure we give a special thank you to some guy named Rob McCormick for the use of our theme song, The Same Love, and that's off of his album, The Folkster. You can find more of his music in a link to his website below, or you can just go to Spotify and search for some guy named Rob, and you'll find a lot of his stuff there. And if you want more information about the Arkansas Forestry Association, you can visit arkforest.org. That's ARKFORESTS.org. And we'll be back next month with a new topic, a new discussion, and a new Voice of Forestry.